In a village where the sea's bounty promises wealth beyond imagination, Kofi, a young fisherman, makes a life-altering deal with a mysterious mermaid. What begins as a promise of riches soon unravels into a journey of guilt, loss, and redemption. As the price of his ambition takes everything he holds dear, Kofi must confront the truth of what he has sacrificed. Will he be able to reclaim the love and peace he once had, or is the cost of his dreams a price too high to pay? The Mermaid's Promise is only the beginning of a story that will change Kofi and his village forever. The sun had barely risen above the horizon, casting a golden hue over the calm waters of the African coast. The small village of Nyamwezi, nestled along the shores, woke to the rhythmic sounds of waves crashing against the rocks. It was a peaceful morning, but for one man, Kofi, the tranquility of the day seemed like a distant memory. Kofi was a fisherman. He had been one all his life, learning the ways of the sea from his father and his grandfather before him. His hands were callous from years of pulling nets, his heart heavy with the weight of responsibility for his family. The sea had always been both a giver and a taker, but Kofi loved it nonetheless, for it was his livelihood. This morning, however, was different. The sea was restless. Kofi had felt the change in the wind the night before, an ominous sign that the storm was coming. He had tried to warn the other fishermen, but most had dismissed his concerns, thinking it was just another fleeting squall. They were wrong. As Kofi set out to sea, the sky darkened, and the winds howled louder. The waves grew higher, their force crashing violently against the boat. Kofi struggled to keep control of the vessel, his hands trembling as he gripped the steering wheel. The storm had arrived with a fury no one had expected. The boat was tossed like a rag doll in the raging waters. Kofi's heart raced, fear creeping into his bones as the storm's wrath intensified. The sails tore, and the mast splintered under the force of the wind. The boat lurched and Kofi was thrown into the cold, unforgiving waters. He fought to keep himself afloat, but the waves pulled him under. The ocean seemed to have a life of its own, determined to swallow him whole. He gasped for air, but the water surged again, dragging him deeper into the depths. His strength faltered and his vision blurred. In those final moments, Kofi was certain he would drown. But just as the darkness began to claim him, something strange happened. A soft light appeared beneath the surface of the water, illuminating the depths. Kofi's body felt lighter, and a sense of calmness washed over him. He was no longer sinking. The sea seemed to have released its grip, cradling him in its depths like a mother holding her child. He gasped for breath and looked around. There, in the water, was a figure, a woman, or rather something more than a woman. Her skin shimmered with the glow of the moonlight, and her long hair flowed like the currents of the ocean. She was unlike any human Kofi had ever seen. Her eyes, dark as the deepest ocean, held an otherworldly wisdom, and her voice, soft, melodic, whispered through the waves. "I am Nyasha, spirit of the sea," the figure said. "I have watched over your people for centuries and I know your pain." Kofi blinked in disbelief. He had heard the stories of the sea spirits, of mermaids who could control the tides and grant wishes, but he never thought they were true. Yet here she was standing before him, her presence radiating an undeniable power. "I can save you, Kofi," Nyasha continued, "but all debts have a price. Do you accept?" Kofi's mind raced. He had no choice. He was drowning, and if she could save him, he would agree to anything. "Yes, I accept," he choked out, his voice weak but filled with desperation. The mermaid smiled, her eyes filled with an ancient sadness. "Then listen carefully, for the cost will not be one you can easily forget." With a graceful movement, she waved her hand, and Kofi was suddenly lifted from the water. His body was placed gently on the shore, the sand beneath him soft and warm. He looked up at Nyasha, her form glowing even brighter now, her smile reassuring but cryptic. "I grant you a boat, a fine vessel to sail the seas, and an abundance of fish that will never run out. Your village will thrive, and you will be known as the greatest fisherman on these shores. But remember this: there is always a price to be paid for such gifts. You will not understand the cost until the time comes. Only then will you know what you have truly sacrificed." With that, Nyasha turned, her form vanishing into the waves as though she had never been there at all. Kofi lay on the beach breathing heavily, overwhelmed by the events of the last few moments. For a moment he wondered if he had imagined the whole thing, but when he looked up he saw it. His boat, pristine and shining, resting gently at the water's edge, waiting for him. A boat that was far grander than anything he could have ever imagined. The promise of a new beginning, and the promise of great fortune. Kofi stood, his legs shaky but determined. He had been saved, and his village would prosper. But as he stared out at the horizon, a chill ran down his spine. The sea had always been a mysterious force, but now it felt like something far more dangerous than he had ever realized. The morning after Kofi's miraculous rescue, the storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie calm. The ocean was still, as though it had never been angry at all. Kofi, still shaken from the encounter with Nyasha, stood at the water's edge, gazing at his new boat. It was more beautiful than anything he had ever seen. A sleek, white vessel with golden accents that shimmered under the sun's rays. The boat was a symbol of his new fortune, a gift from the mermaid who had saved his life. As he stepped closer to it, he noticed something unusual. The boat seemed to hum with energy, as if it had a life of its own. But Kofi pushed the strange feeling aside. He was alive, and his village would soon be saved from the hardships they had endured for so long. With a deep breath, Kofi boarded the boat and set sail. The ocean was calm, the wind gentle, and the fish seemed to leap eagerly into his nets, as if they knew he had been chosen for something greater. The boat moved effortlessly through the water, almost as though it was gliding, and every time Kofi cast his net, it returned with an abundant catch. His heart swelled with pride. He could already see the prosperity this would bring to his village. Days turned into weeks, and Kofi's reputation grew. The village, once struggling, now flourished. The people marveled at the endless supply of fish Kofi brought in each day. His wealth grew, and soon, his name was known far beyond the shores of Nyamwezi. The merchants came from distant lands, offering him riches in exchange for his catch. Kofi had everything he could have ever dreamed of: fortune, respect, and a future without fear of hunger. But despite all his success, something gnawed at Kofi's heart. The promise Nyasha had made to him echoed in his mind. There is always a price to be paid for such gifts. You will not understand the cost until the time comes. Kofi tried to push those thoughts away. The wealth, the luxury, it was all too much to resist. Each day he saw the villagers' grateful faces, each meal they ate because of the fish he provided, and he convinced himself that he had made the right choice. He had saved them after all. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Kofi stood by the shore watching the waves. He felt a familiar presence beside him, and when he turned, there she was, Nyasha, the mermaid. Her long hair flowed like the currents of the sea, and her eyes shimmered with a knowing sadness. "You have done well, Kofi," she said, her voice soft but powerful. "Your village thrives and your wealth grows beyond your wildest dreams." Kofi smiled, his chest swelling with pride. "I've worked hard for this, Nyasha. I couldn't have done it without your help. The village is flourishing now, and everyone has enough to eat. I've given them everything they need." Nyasha's gaze softened, but there was something unreadable in her eyes. "But there is always a cost, Kofi. You may not see it yet, but the debt will come due. No one can escape the consequences of their choices, no matter how noble their intentions." Kofi's heart skipped a beat, but he refused to let his fear show. "What do you mean? I have kept my end of the bargain. I've brought prosperity to my people." Nyasha stepped closer, her voice low. "The price I spoke of is not always immediate. It may not come today or tomorrow. But remember this, Kofi. Everything you have gained, every joy you have felt has come at a price, and one day you will have to pay." Kofi's confidence wavered. He had been so consumed with his success, with the happiness he had brought to others, that he hadn't stopped to consider the truth in Nyasha's words. "There is always a price to be paid." The words echoed in his mind, reverberating like a haunting lullaby. "I will never forget your promise," Kofi said, trying to reassure himself as much as her. "But for now I am grateful. My people are saved. We are safe." Nyasha nodded, her eyes lingering on him for a long moment before she turned toward the sea. "You have made a choice, Kofi, a choice that will define the rest of your life. But remember, even the brightest stars fall." With those final words she vanished into the waves, leaving Kofi standing alone on the shore, his thoughts a tangle of doubt and confusion. As the days passed, Kofi's life continued to prosper. His boat never faltered, his nets always returned full, and the fish never ceased to appear. He had everything a man could desire, yet deep inside, a growing unease settled in his chest. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the mermaid's warning had been more than just a cryptic phrase. His wealth, his fame, it all seemed hollow now. There was an emptiness that money couldn't fill, a gnawing sense that he had missed something important. He had given his village prosperity, but in doing so, He had lost something precious, something he hadn't even known he had been willing to sacrifice. And so, Kofi stood at the edge of the sea once more, staring into the endless horizon. He was a man of great wealth, but the price of his fortune had yet to reveal itself. He could feel the weight of the mermaid's promise pressing down on him, a reminder that no one could escape the consequences of their choices forever. Weeks turned into months, and Kofi's life became a testament to his success. The village of Nyamwezi had transformed into a bustling hub of trade, its people well-fed and content. The markets were filled with goods from faraway lands, and the sound of laughter echoed through the streets. Kofi's boat, ever more magnificent, was the symbol of their prosperity, the centerpiece of their lives. But the shadows of unease never quite left his heart. He had been warned by Nyasha, the mermaid, that there would be a cost, a price he would one day have to pay for his newfound fortune. But each day that passed without consequence made him believe the warning was just the ramblings of a sea spirit. Perhaps, he thought, the price had already been paid, and now he could enjoy the fruits of his labor in peace. Yet, even in his moments of joy, there was always a lingering sense of something missing. One evening, as Kofi sat by the fire, counting the gold coins he had earned from his latest catch, his thoughts were interrupted by a letter from his distant relative, Amina, who lived in a village on the other side of the mountains. His heart sank as he read the words. "Your mother is gravely ill. She calls for you, Kofi. Come quickly before it is too late." Kofi's pulse quickened, and a sense of dread settled over him. His mother had been the one constant in his life, the one person who had always believed in him even when times were tough. He hadn't seen her in years, too consumed by his ambition and the wealth he had gained. The guilt hit him like a wave. Had his rise to prosperity caused him to neglect the one person who mattered most? Without hesitation, Kofi packed his belongings and set out on the long journey to his mother's village. As the days passed, his mind raced with worry. The journey felt like an eternity, each step heavier than the last. He had been so focused on his success that he had failed to notice the cracks forming in his relationships, the people he had neglected along the way. And now his mother, his only family, was dying. When Kofi finally arrived at his mother's village, he found it as he remembered it, a quiet, humble place, nestled in the valley between the mountains. But the atmosphere was different now. There was an air of sadness that hung over the village, a sense of loss that Kofi had never felt before. He hurried to his mother's house, his heart pounding in his chest. The door was ajar, and when he entered, he found her lying in her bed, pale and frail, her eyes closed. Her breath was shallow, and her face was etched with pain. Kofi rushed to her side, his heart breaking as he took her cold hand in his. "Mother," he whispered, his voice breaking, "I'm here. I've come for you." Her eyes fluttered open, and a faint smile crossed her lips. "Kofi, my son," she whispered, her voice weak but full of love. "You've grown so strong." "I've been so busy," Kofi said, guilt flooding his voice. "I should have come sooner. I should have been here for you." His mother shook her head weakly. "You've made your way in the world. You've done well. I'm proud of you." Kofi's eyes welled with tears. "Please don't leave me. I can't lose you, mother." She squeezed his hand, her gaze soft but filled with sorrow. "It's too late, Kofi. I've lived my life. But you must not forget who you are. The wealth, the fame, they are fleeting. It is love that endures. It is love that makes life worth living." Her words were like a knife to his heart. He had been so consumed with his ambition, so blinded by his success, that he had forgotten what truly mattered. He had neglected the one person who had loved him unconditionally, the person who had always been there for him. And now it was too late. His mother's breathing grew more labored, and with one final breath she closed her eyes. The room fell silent. Kofi sat there, holding her hand, his tears falling freely now. The world outside seemed to fade away as the weight of his choices crashed down upon him. He had everything he could ever want, wealth, power, and fame, but it all felt meaningless without the love and connection he had taken for granted. His mother was gone, and he couldn't undo the years of neglect. He had sacrificed his relationships for his ambition, and now he was paying the price. As Kofi sat by his mother's side, grief consuming him, a voice whispered in his ear. He turned, and there, standing in the doorway, was Nyasha, the mermaid. Her expression was solemn, her eyes filled with ancient sorrow. "You see now, Kofi," she said softly, "you've gained everything, but you've lost what truly mattered. The cost is not always apparent at first, but it is always there, waiting for you." Kofi's heart shattered as he looked at her. the truth of her words sinking deep into his soul. "I didn't understand," he whispered. "I thought I was doing the right thing, for my people, for my village, but I was wrong." Nyasha's gaze softened. "It is never too late to change, Kofi, but first you must face the consequences of your choices. You cannot run from them." With that, Nyasha vanished, her form dissolving into the air as if she had never been there. Kofi sat alone in the room, the weight of his loss pressing down on him. He had been warned, but he hadn't listened, and now the consequences were clear. Kofi stood alone in the small village hut, the stillness of the room pressing heavily against his chest. His mother's death, the weight of his choices, and the cold, undeniable truth of Nyasha's words overwhelmed him. The rich and endless bounty that had once felt like a blessing now seemed like a curse. For all his success, he had lost the one thing that truly mattered, his family. As night fell, Kofi found himself outside, staring up at the stars. The village was silent, the air cool against his skin. He had traveled so far from the life he had known, from the humble fisherman who had lived for love and survival, to a man lost in ambition, blinded by his desires. He thought of his mother's final words, "It is love that endures." He had been so foolish, so consumed by his need to provide for others that he had forgotten to be present for those who mattered most. He had sacrificed his heart's true desires for empty promises of wealth and fame. And now, with his mother gone, he realized the futility of it all. Tears filled Kofi's eyes as he gazed at the sea, the same sea that had once seemed like his savior, now appearing to him as a reflection of his inner turmoil. Was the price worth it? He wondered. He had everything: the admiration of his village, a wealth beyond measure, and the eternal bounty of the ocean. Yet none of it could bring his mother back. In the quiet of the night, Kofi made a decision. He would return to the sea, to the place where it had all started. He would seek Nyasha again, the mermaid who had warned him of the price, and ask her to undo the damage he had done. If he could not reverse the loss of his mother, perhaps he could find some way to balance the scales. He had to make amends. At dawn, Kofi set sail, his heart heavy with regret. The wind was calm, and the ocean was eerily still. As he sailed further from shore, he felt the weight of the promise he had made to the mermaid, a promise he had forgotten in his pursuit of wealth. The sea had given him everything, and now it seemed it was time for him to return what he had taken. Hours passed before Kofi finally saw the glow of Nyasha's form beneath the water's surface. The light shimmered like a beacon, guiding him toward her. As his boat drifted closer, he felt the familiar pull of the sea, the gentle yet powerful force that had saved him before. And then there she was, Nyasha, standing tall in the water, her skin glowing like the moonlight. Her eyes, deep and knowing, met his. "You return, Kofi," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of wisdom. "I knew you would come." Kofi lowered his head in shame. "I have come to ask for your forgiveness. I have made mistakes, Nyasha. I have lost the most precious thing in my life, my mother. And I have failed to honor the promise I made to you. I was blind to what truly mattered, and now I am paying the price." Nyasha regarded him silently for a moment. Her gaze was inscrutable, her presence both comforting and daunting. "It is true, Kofi. The price has been paid, and it cannot be undone. Your mother is gone, and you cannot change the past. But there is something else, something you can still do." Kofi looked up, hope rising within him. "What can I do? Tell me, Nyasha. I will do anything." Nyasha's voice softened, like the whisper of the wind. "The true cost of your choices was never the loss of your mother alone. It is the loss of your heart, the part of you that gave love freely and without hesitation. You sacrificed that part of yourself for ambition, but it is not too late, Kofi. You still have the power to change. The road to redemption is long, but it begins with acknowledging your mistakes and seeking to heal the wounds you've caused." Kofi's heart swelled with a mixture of grief and hope. How can I heal the wounds? How can I find redemption when all I've done is take? Nyasha's eyes glimmered with understanding. "Start by giving, Kofi, not just with your hands or your wealth, but with your heart. The love you gave to your village, to your people, give it to yourself first. Learn to love not just what you have, but who you are. And then you must return to the people you've neglected, the ones who need your love most. Your village, your family, and most of all yourself." Kofi nodded slowly, his eyes filled with tears. "I understand now. I've spent so much time trying to be everything for everyone that I forgot what it meant to be whole. to be true to myself and those I love. Nyasha smiled a faint knowing smile. It is a hard lesson, but you are learning. Now, you must go back to your village and make amends. The road will not be easy, but it will be worth it. Remember, Kofi, true wealth is not found in gold or fish. It is found in love, in kindness, and in the way you treat those around you. That is the greatest treasure. Kofi swallowed the lump in his throat and took a deep breath. Thank you, Nyasha, for showing me the way. The mermaid nodded and with a graceful movement, submerged herself back into the sea, her glowing form disappearing into the depths. Kofi watched her vanish, the weight in his heart shifting just a little. He wasn't sure what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. Turning his boat around, Kofi sailed back to his village. He knew that the road to redemption would be long and filled with challenges, but he was ready. He had learned the greatest lesson of all, that love, not wealth, was the true treasure of life, and he would spend the rest of his days seeking to restore what he had lost, his heart, his relationships, and the peace he had once known. Kofi returned to his village with a heart that felt lighter, but the weight of his past mistakes still lingered heavily in his chest. The journey back had been long and filled with reflection. He had learned so much during his time with Nyasha, the mermaid, lessons that would shape the rest of his life. He no longer cared for the riches, the power, or the status he had once craved. What he sought now was peace and the opportunity to heal the wounds he had inflicted on those he loved. When Kofi arrived at his village, he was met with a strange mix of reactions. The people, once so grateful for his prosperity, now saw him in a different light. They admired the wealth he had brought them, but there was a subtle distance between them, a recognition that something had shifted within him. His mother's passing had touched the entire village, for she had been a pillar of love and kindness. Her death had left a hole in the community, and Kofi knew that he too had been part of that loss. Kofi stood in the center of the village, the familiar sights and sounds of his home surrounding him, but for the first time, he felt truly connected to it. The grand boat that had once been a symbol of his triumph now felt like an anchor to his past. He knew what he had to do. The time had come for him to make amends. The village square was filled with people going about their daily tasks when Kofi stepped forward. His heart raced, his palms sweaty, but he knew that this was the moment of truth. The villagers looked up at him, some with curiosity, others with caution. He took a deep breath and began to speak. "I have wronged you all," Kofi said, his voice strong yet filled with emotion. "I was blinded by my ambition, by the wealth and power I sought. I neglected my family, my home, and the love that should have been at the heart of everything I did. I was so focused on providing for others that I forgot to truly give from my heart, and for that I am truly sorry." A murmur rippled through the crowd as Kofi paused, his eyes scanning the faces before him. His thoughts went back to his mother, her final words, her love. He could feel her presence in the air around him, guiding him. "I cannot change the past," Kofi continued, his voice trembling, "but I can make things right. I will spend the rest of my days giving back to this community, to you all. I will no longer be the man I was, the man who thought that wealth could solve everything. I will be a man who leads with love, with kindness, and with humility." There was silence in the village square as the villagers absorbed his words. Slowly, one by one, they began to approach him. An elder, her face lined with the wisdom of many years, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Kofi," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "you have the strength to change, and we can see it in your heart. It is not too late for you." Tears filled Kofi's eyes as he nodded, grateful for the forgiveness and understanding that surrounded him. He had spent so long seeking to change the world, to fix the problems of his people, that he had neglected the very thing that could bring true change, his own heart. But now he understood. True leadership was not about power, not about wealth. It was about love, connection, and the willingness to be vulnerable enough to admit when you were wrong. Over the next several months, Kofi worked tirelessly to restore the relationships he had neglected. He visited the families who had supported him throughout his journey, making amends for his absence and offering his help in any way he could. He spent more time with the children of the village, teaching them how to fish, but more importantly, teaching them the values of compassion and humility. He used his wealth, not for personal gain, but to invest in the future of his people, building schools, improving the health of the village, and ensuring that no one would go hungry again. And as the seasons passed, Kofi felt his heart slowly heal. The hole that had once been filled with ambition and regret was now filled with love, the kind of love he had learned to give, both to himself and to others. He began to understand that the true wealth of life was not measured by gold, but by the connections we forge, the love we share, and the peace we find within ourselves. One fateful evening, as Kofi stood by the shore once more, gazing at the now calm sea, he saw the glimmer of a familiar figure in the distance. It was Nyasha, the mermaid, her presence glowing like the stars in the night sky. She approached him slowly, her expression filled with approval. "You have done well, Kofi," she said, her voice as soft as the breeze. "You have learned the greatest lesson of all, that true prosperity is found in the heart, not in riches." Kofi smiled, a sense of peace settling over him. "Thank you, Nyasha. I understand now. The price I paid was heavy, but it led me to the truth. I am no longer the man I was. I have learned to love, not just the world around me but myself as well." Nyasha nodded, her smile gentle. "Remember, Kofi, that life is a journey of growth and learning. It is not the mistakes we make that define us but how we rise from them. You have found your way." And with that, she vanished back into the sea, leaving Kofi standing on the shore, his heart full of gratitude and hope for the future. The mermaid's promise had been fulfilled, not with more riches, but with the gift of wisdom, love, and redemption. Kofi knew that his journey was far from over. There would be challenges, hardships, and moments of doubt, but he had found the strength to face them, knowing that the true treasures of life, love, kindness, and humility, would always guide him through. And as he watched the stars reflect on the calm waters of the sea, he felt at peace, knowing that he had finally found the path to true fulfillment.